I had to prove that I was, not using illegal means to gain information. In fact, he slid into my DMs. I would never have released these messages if Harry hadn't dragged us all to court. The nickname Mr. Mischief.
Mm.
Yes, well, that weekend, everyone came out with mad nicknames for each other. We all know what mine was. And he calls me Griff as well, which was my other nickname.
You'll appreciate that I obviously have to ask this, but I have always been clear you are now a married woman and you have children and, you've moved on. But he says, hope you're really well, Griff. Miss our movie Snuggles. That's him saying that. But it does suggest at least some type of romance over that weekend. Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large of The Mail on Sunday. I really do believe, Charlotte, that your evidence in this High Court case against Prince Harry was utterly critical to the vindication of the Daily Mail in the case, and also, in my opinion, to proving that Prince Harry lied in court. So I'm delighted to have you here because we've obviously spoken a lot about this case. I covered it in detail, a lot about you and your reporting, but we've never actually got to hear the inside story because, of course, when you're going through a case like this, you can't speak out. But to kick off, Charlotte, I thought it was very important to look at what Justice Nicklin said about your evidence. He credited you as an impressive witness, and he dismissed allegations that you used hacking or blagging, accepting your evidence as honest. He said that your evidence and the evidence of Katie Nicholl, your former boss at the Mail on Sunday, now at Vanity Fair and the Royals Uncensored, and that your sourcing of an article about Elton John was truthful and persuasive. So it was absolutely categorical what happened in court. But of course, there was the mic drop moment, and we will get to it, which is the release of these messages, which Harry, again, my words, appeared to lie about in court. But before we get into the details, Charlotte, how do you personally feel about this vindication and the fact that Prince Harry took you, a former friend, into court, seemingly to try and destroy your career, and instead he walks away, I believe, with his credibility completely destroyed?
Well, I feel vindicated. I feel shattered. It's been going on for years. I haven't seen much of my three kids lately. And do you know what? It was jubilant in the office yesterday. We didn't want to sort of celebrate too much, but we couldn't really help ourselves in the end. It was such a weight off our shoulders, and I think we didn't realize how heavy that weight was until it was released. And the mood in the office yesterday was amazing. I just felt so, some people were in tears. I just felt so sad for my colleagues who've been dragged through the mud. All of us might have had our careers taken away.
Yeah, because you didn't choose
so I feel
this.
relieved.
You didn't choose this. And that's important to point out. I've been through a very similar case. You didn't choose this. You didn't want the messages released. This was something that Prince Harry insisted upon.
Yeah, I'd kind of forgotten about those messages, and I had to trawl through my Facebook. You know how Facebook keeps your history for years and years.
Thank God.
Thank God I kept the receipts, but it's not like I printed them out on my desk or had them framed or anything. They'd gone into the mist of time, and then I had to prove that I was, not using illegal means to gain information. In fact, he slid into my DMs.
Exactly. And look, the Times today, the newspaper of record, actually backed up my reporting yesterday, which is that Harry they say contradicted his evidence in court numerous times. Sorry, it's the Daily Telegraph, actually, not the Times. Got to get that right. I would say lie, Charlotte, but here are the examples and the evidence in response. So claim, my social circles were not leaky. Fact, Harry discussed source of leaks with friends, including you. Claim, I cut contact with journalists. They're referring to you, Charlotte. Fact, they messaged repeatedly and met several times. Claim, I would not share private information with strangers around a campfire. Fact, Harry described this in his autobiography. Claim, staff didn't brief media on private matters. Fact, Emails show they did. Claim, Diana's story came from Mail listening into calls. Fact, it came from the Prince's public statement. So, Charlotte, what can you say about Harry's honesty in court? I know you probably don't want to speak about the other journalists, but I will come to the transcript of what he said in court shortly to prove my point. But are you allowed to say that Prince Harry lied about the extent of your relationship? Are you prepared to say that? Or have you been advised against using the L word?
Yeah, no, I have been advised against it. But what I would say, which is patently obvious, is this idea that his circle wasn't leaky. It's just it doesn't make any sense, because he wrote in Spare that he went out on the town. He played naked billiards with random girls from Las Vegas, and of course, what I was there really to prove was that, I'm exactly the same age as Harry, right? So in my early career, when I was in my early 20s, when these Facebook messages came out, when we were sort of hanging out, it was a wild time. It was the end of the noughties. People were falling in and out of nightclubs, journalists, celebrities, Prince Harry, and people were chatty, people were loose-lipped. You can't rewrite history and say, well, I've always been buttoned up and watertight. And when there's actual pictures of him falling out of nightclubs. So for me, that I felt like that was my role in the case, and that's why I felt like I had to dig out those Facebook messages, because I am an example of how he was very indiscriminate about who he chatted to and who he hung out with, and that was okay, because we we journalists, we were pretty discerning too. We decided what we did and didn't write about, and I just feel that in recent years, especially since he's moved to LA, he imagines his past. The Harry who he was then is the Harry who he is now. Harry who he was then was, fun, wild, joyful, bit mad, bit chatty, added girls on Facebook. It's just a complete rewriting of history, I'd say.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Well, Charlotte, we actually here at Outspoken recreated some of Harry's evidence in court because, of course, we're not allowed cameras in court in the UK, which I think in a case like this, you may have been relieved, Charlotte, but it's a bit of a shame. So we recreated Harry's evidence. Here's just a part of what he said about you in court. If you value the whole truth and nothing but the truth on these royal stories, make sure you subscribe to Outspoken right now. It allows me to work outside of the MSM and the Royal Rota.
I had no idea she was a journalist. I never used the name Mr. Mischief.
Did you meet her in Ibiza?
I don't think that can be right. I don't believe I have ever been to Ibiza other than with my now wife. My social circles were not leaky. I want to make that absolutely clear. I would have to cut contact with this person.
How did you feel, Charlotte, when you learned what Harry had said about you while giving evidence? Because you weren't in the courtroom that day, were you?
No, I wasn't. How did I feel? I felt, honestly, I just shrugged my shoulders. It was what I expected. He has rewritten history. He remembers things very differently. I felt he was very under-researched, and I felt that Sherborne was as well. I just wonder whether he'd actually, reread Spare before going up in court, reread his own notes, reminded himself of that time. And, I wasn't angry. I just shrugged my shoulders and thought, this is very sad, because this is going to end badly for you, Harry.
We have some other parts of the transcript, Charlotte, and this is when Harry is being questioned by your KC, or the Daily Mail's KC, a guy called Anthony White. And he says to Harry, quoting you, she says that she also socialized with you and your friends in London at nightclubs and house parties. Harry replies, not as far as I'm aware. White says, not as far as you're aware? And Harry says, as I said to my lord just now, I met her once at a weekend, and then the next day after I'd left, after the weekend had finished, I found out who she was. I had words with my friend, and that was that. He also wasn't aware. White says, at some point in 2011, you added Ms. Griffiths as a friend on Facebook, didn't you? The next part of the evidence, Harry said, that was probably exactly the weekend I'm talking about. White says you use the name Mr. Mischief to make posts to her. Harry says, no, I've never used the name Mr. Mischief, Mr. White. Mr. White, considering Ms. Griffiths started with this claim that I was an Ibiza and that she was partying with me, if that's where she began, I think everything else that you say has to be taken with a large pinch of salt. White said, I suggest you exchange friendly messages about socializing together on Facebook. Harry says, I have no idea. White says you gave her your mobile number on Facebook in a message on the 6th of December 2011. But the house party of Arthur Landon is a different occasion, I suggest. It's a house party at the home of Arthur Landon that Ms. Griffiths attended and you attended, and she arrived late and had to give you a ring so you could let her in. Harry, no, I don't believe that. I believe that Ms. Griffiths, the only time I've met her was at that weekend with Mr. Landon. And as I said, I had no idea who she was. Was she working for the Daily Mail at that time? I'm afraid I believe she was. I believe when I began the questions, I explained that she worked. Harry interrupts. Well, she certainly never shared that with me. I had to find that out myself. White says on the diary from 2008, Harry says, I wasn't aware of that at the time, but when I found out, I cut contact with her. Now, Charlotte, at that point, the problem is none of us have actually seen these Facebook messages. So even though lots of us in the media had sort of been broadly aware of this case bubbling under and the fact that your relationship with Prince Harry was going to be a serious part of this case, at the same time, he was effectively trying to paint you really as almost like a bit of a fantasist there, wasn't he? He was sort of saying like, oh, I met her once, no contact, found out she was a journalist, and that was that. At that point, Charlotte, how difficult was it for you? Because the messages were not public. The messages did not become public until the Times newspaper made a request for them to enter the public domain.
I knew that the judge had the messages, so I just let him talk, really. I just thought...
Did you not want to release them?
I would never have released these messages if Harry hadn't dragged us all to court. And don't forget, he said the same about Katie Nicholl. You know, I've never met her. She used to he said that Katie Nicholl used to go to parties in order to provide a cover for her phone hacking. I knew perfectly well. I knew everyone in Fleet Street knew. We were diary girls. We went to parties partly for fun and partly for our job.
Yeah, I remember seeing you both at these parties.
Yeah. I mean, to think that we would fabricate an entire career in order to phone hack. What we did was we learned how to be journalists on the beat by going to these parties, by socializing in these circles. In terms of those messages, I knew the judge had the messages. I didn't particularly want them to come out, if I'm going to be honest, because they were private messages between me and Harry, and I unlike him perhaps, value my privacy and even his. So, you know, of course, I didn't want to show the world those messages. I knew they might come out, and I knew the judge had them.
Had you told your editors in the past, Charlotte, like, he's not telling the truth because we did have this ongoing relationship and I've got the messages to prove it? Were your editors aware of that?
This channel provides news reporting, commentary, criticism, and analysis based on publicly available information. All images, video clips, and other materials belong to their respective copyright owners and are used where appropriate for commentary.
Because that's the point that I've made on the show. You would have had lots of opportunities, Charlotte, over the years. You know how it works. Very often, especially journalists at the Mail, are encouraged, you know, and I did my time at the Mail, I know how it works, are encouraged to write about their private liaisons or encounters or relationships, whatever it happens to be, with high-profile figures. And I really do think it's an important part of this case that you had never done that, had you? Even though, like, we were aware that, I mean, I certainly knew back in the day that you'd had some type of friendship with Prince Harry. I remember that sort of being, you'd never spoken to me about it, but I remember it being common knowledge on the circuit. You had never, ever written about it at all.
No, and I have to say, there are times when you're having a slow news week and you think, I've got no stories. What should I come up with? It never occurred to me to go, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll write about my friendship with Prince Harry in 2011 when I was in my early 20s. Because, you know, as journalists, we're trained, you know this, Dan, never to be the story. And also, I worked really hard on finessing, with some mistakes along the line, on finessing that fine line between my social life and my work life, and sometimes I did hear stories. Sometimes I was with famous people in my private life, and you just have to be very careful to decide what you write and what you don't.
Yeah,
Because
it's such a fine
these
line,
are
isn't it? Because what people don't understand is it was a totally different era of journalism. I mean, at the time, Charlotte, and people find this crazy, I was working for the News of the World, then the Mail, then the Sun. And it was all after people had gone to jail for phone hacking. And the whole reason that I ever had a career in Fleet Street is because I refused to do any of that stuff, and I never would have. And so it really resonates with me when I hear you and Katie Nicholl talking about the fact that you did the hard yards, you went out, you socialized, you made the contacts, you got to know the celebrities, because that's what we did back then. And people need to understand this was an era before social media where newspapers had a huge amount of power, and celebrities actually did want to talk to you, did want to have private relationships with you in order for you to report accurately on their lives. There was nothing negative about that. It was just a different era before a celebrity could post a picture of their family on Instagram or whatever it happened to be. But look, anyway, so then the messages are released, and it's one of the mic drop moments in the case. Again, I always thought the case was totally delusional from Prince Harry's side. I mean, don't even get me started about Hacked Off and Byline Times and these criminals, actual criminals, who had tried to, with Prince Harry's help, ruin my life as well. So I know exactly what they were doing. But there were still a few sticky moments, never involving you. And I won't go into it because it's not fair, because obviously it was a total slam dunk victory for the Mail, and we trust Justice Nicklin in this case. I think it's all 97, isn't it? 97 stories. He says they were all legally obtained. But it came on the last day, the release of these messages, and it felt like a mic drop moment because Harry's evidence had already been a total car crash. And my jaw dropped when I was reading through the messages, because it proved, in my view, and I know you can't use the word, but it proved to me that Harry had perjured himself in court. And so the messages, we'll just go through a couple of them, Charlotte, which are relevant. So this is one of the critical things. December 2011, he messages you, and you're very confident that this was the first exchange. You didn't message him, he messages you.
Was driving back from the country house weekend, and I'd pulled over to fill up with petrol, and I checked my Facebook. That's what we did back then. It was the old days. And I already had a message. We hadn't even made it back to London yet. Okay,
and so the Mr. Mischief thing, and this has obviously become really important, you use it first. So it's a little nickname, seemingly, between the two of you. But he does acknowledge it, doesn't he, later? So do you think he would have been aware of it?
Aware of the nickname Mr. Mischief? Yes. Well, that weekend, everyone came out with mad nicknames for each other. We all know what mine was. And I didn't know him that well. So I felt it was a bit over familiar to come up with a nickname. So I came up with Mr. Mischief. It wasn't very good. I have to say, I wish I'd been a bit wittier. But again, this is the first time I'd met the guy, and I'd spent two days and 2 nights with that whole gang, so I got to know them pretty well.
And the thing, Charlotte, he does use the term. I think this is one of the reasons that he has been caught red-handed, because yes, you use it first, but he then says back to you, Mr. Mischief, ? How do I get that title? I was surely no worse than anyone else. So he is at least acknowledging that he's aware that you had called him it, at the very least.
Yeah, he was. And, I think it's all sort of harmless banter, really. We were some 20-year-olds sort of reminiscing about a wild weekend.
Yes, and you talk a little bit about that weekend and in the messages, and talk about the fact that calling him Mr. Mischief is a compliment, but you're also talking about work and that sort of thing as well. So there's quite a detailed, amount of conversation, and he even acknowledges the fact that he didn't really seem to enjoy the fact that he was having to speak at a charity event, and that it's sort of almost like, oh, it's a, it's a bit of a drag. I think he says doing army stuff. Otherwise, I would have been there playing and then drinking you under the table. The whole thing raised a lot of money, so I'm pretty happy. Just wish I could have been there, especially now that you're there. So he is talking about work. It feels like you did have a quite close relationship because it's not just on the surface chat. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's fair. And he calls me Griff as well, which was my other nickname. So he obviously knew my surname, and I think I've been a diary editor for 2 or 3 years by that point. So I thought that was very telling.
Yeah, and this is the key line, Charlotte, and you'll appreciate that I obviously have to ask this, but I have always been clear you are now a married woman and you have children and, you've moved on. But he says, hope you're really well, Griff. Miss our movie snuggles. That's him saying that. But it does suggest at least some type of romance over that weekend. Are you prepared at all to talk about that?
Well, there wasn't as much romance as you think, and I have written about it in tomorrow's Daily Mail.
Oh, good. Give us a preview.
Well, honestly, it wasn't. It in the modern context of Netflix and chill, I think that expression sounds worse than it does. But you've got to remember, it was 2011, and I think he was just being. It was actually really sweet. Sort of way of referring to the fact that we all gathered around and watched a film when we were hungover the day after the big Saturday night party.
So you wouldn't say it was romantic?
No.
And what was he like? Because he actually seems like a really nice, normal, fun guy in the exchange of these messages. Like everything that he's not now is how he seems in these messages.
Yeah, I think that's why I always kept these messages private, because when I knew him back then, he was fun and nice. I mean, the messages from him are really sweet. He's just a sweet. I felt quite sorry for him at the time. He seemed very lonely. He seemed like he was looking for someone. I don't think it was necessarily me, but I just remember feeling a bit of sorry for him. He seemed isolated and looking for connection, and he was nice. He was a nice guy. I honestly don't recognise the Harry that I see now with his hands there and and his sort of speeches and his word salad. I just don't recognise that guy. And that is a reason why I never revealed the messages, because I sort of liked him. He was nice back then.
Did you ever come across him again, Charlotte?
We met more than once, yeah.
So after the Facebook messages?
Yeah.
And was it friendly, or had he sort of turned?
I don't think he turned until he moved to LA and Megxit and all of that. He stayed. He stayed at the kind of fun Harry we used to write about in very friendly terms in the tabloid press for years.
So he never had any issue with you. It's not like he'd come up to you and berate you or sort of say horrible Daily Mail or anything like that. If you saw him out and about, he was fine with you.
Yeah. And
so when you learn that he's actually, because remember, Harry's tried to do this to me before, but he didn't go through with it because it would have been insane, because what he was claiming was completely true. But you know that this is not, this is about personal destruction of individuals, Charlotte. You know that. I mean, for example, outside of the Mail, look at what he's tried to do with Piers Morgan, where even now he is advocating for the Metropolitan Police to reopen their investigation into Piers Morgan. So he wants to destroy individuals. And you were very much targeted. Katie Nicholl was very much targeted. And Rebecca English, the royal editor of the Daily Mail, were very much targeted. Now, we've been clear, and the episode yesterday, we spoke about this a lot. All three of you completely vindicated. There's no question whatsoever around that. But was it shocking to you, given your personal relationship or friendship with Harry, that he was so determined to drag you through this? It does change things in my view. Like, for example, my relationship with Harry has always been completely professional. and I know he despises me, and it's not at all a surprise that he wants to destroy me. Do you see what I mean? But given you had this personal relationship, was it even more shocking?
It was, because the thing about Harry, I've always believed, is that he sees journalists as one big blob, one big evil ogre, possibly with red horns. We're all just one and the same. And I think this is where the trial was so damaging for him, because yes, the News of the World did phone hack, and those journalists did do that, but it never occurred to him that Daily Mail journalists and yourself and some of us are normal human beings. We use our own discretion, we use our own intuition to decide what stories go in, what stories go out, and we're not all the same person. And I thought, possibly, I do think maybe he would have thought, well, I remember meeting that journalist once, she was all right, maybe they're not all the same. But he can't see that at all, and that's why I
And
think he's
we've
so
never tried
surprised
to
when we didn't
destroy his
settle.
life, Charlotte, or
We've been
his
so
wife's
complimentary about
life.
him. You must have written lots of lovely stories about him. You know, I have. I gotten all manner of, every time I write a good story about him, which is rare, of course I get merry hell. But the thing is about being a journalist, and you know this, Dan, is if you've got a good scoop, you've got a good scoop. And I'm afraid if it's good or bad against the person, you just go with the scoop, because we're journalists, you go with the scoop. And he's never appreciated the times that journalists such as myself have written nice stories about him. Or perhaps, when the strip billiards encounter happened in Vegas, he must have been so happy that the red tops all said, "Oh, go on, Harry, good on you." And that was the mood of the nation at the time. There's no kind of gratitude for any of that. The fact, he could have been taken down back then, years and years ago. There was a bit of playfulness between tabloid journalists and Harry for years. But no, he only sees the negative in everything.
And Charlotte, you're stunned that Meghan Markle made him go through all of this yesterday. A ritual humiliation. I mean, I read the account from the Daily Telegraph inside the Chatham House event, and they just said Harry looked totally broken. Like, he obviously had to go up and deliver the speech. You're surprised, Charlotte, I saw you on GB News, that Meghan was not there, and you think it was significant in a way.
I think it's significant. When I first got wind of the fact that Meghan wasn't coming to London and was possibly coming to the UK, but not the London part, I thought, well, maybe the case is going to go our way, because she would trust me, if he'd won, she would have been standing by his side, I believe, saying, "Well done, we slayed another dragon." But in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer, that might come in. That might come into its own.
A hell of a lot poorer at the moment. Although they've got insurance, don't they, for this case?
They've got insurance. I don't know the ins and outs of the financial situation. I don't think we're going to know for another 3 weeks. But no, I would have expected to see her by his side. I felt sorry for him. I know that's going to be an unpopular opinion, but he's just, it's what Paul Dacre said yesterday. It's just sad. Poor Harry just didn't know what he was getting himself into. I don't have a lot of sympathy for Harry, before you come for me. It's just,
I have none.
Sight. A quivering 41-year-old man alone giving a speech at the exact time that the case was revealed and it ruled against him. It was a sorry sight.
And then he's tried to effectively say that it was a whitewash and called Justice Nicklon's credibility into the line. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. But look, I do want to talk a bit more, Charlotte, about your other reporting in terms of Meghan Markle, and also you have been very much on the forefront in the, shall we say, Operation Thor type area. Is this really this plot to find a way for Buckingham Palace to bring Prince Harry and Meghan back? So stand by. What we're going to do is head over to Substack now as the Royal Uncancelled After Show continues. Much more from the vindicated Charlotte Griffiths, editor-at-large of the Mail on Sunday. You can join us there at www.outspoken.live. This is going to be an absolutely fascinating second part of the conversation, so please do join us there. Dan Wootton Outspoken is your no spin, no bias, no censorship outlet for independent news. We have no big tech backing or billionaires pulling my strings, but that does mean I need your support. So please hit subscribe on YouTube, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe to Dan Wootton Outspoken on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's totally free, but allows me to continue my promise to always keep fighting for you.